The current minimum wage is $7.25. A lot of states have minimum wage requirement laws, and there have been many people who've advocated for it to increase. People who are to the contrary will say that if you increase it, everything else will increase. And I'm going to try to lay out or make the case for why that belief is full of nonsense. So, the cause for making it bigger. There is a website, and it is called Out of Reach. And I'll actually have a link in the description to the website where it shows you the amount that you would need to have or be making per hour to afford a two-bedroom home in every state. Now they vary each one, but for example, I live in California, and to afford a two-bedroom home, I would need to make $32 an hour and work 119 hours per week. So that by itself should, if that doesn't tell you already that something is amiss, it should. But also factor in that over 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 63% of them can't afford $1,000 emergency. These are very poor statistics that are not to lay the blame squarely on Trump. I've talked about before having a problem with, let's say being in all these different wars. That didn't start under Trump, but he gets blamed nonetheless because he did nothing to get out of any of them. And sure enough, when you have his supporters who realize that this wage is not payable, or it's not doing what it needs to do, which is be a living wage, a starvation wage, they will oftentimes find themselves arguing for things to stay the same. I actually have a series of quotes. And also, to keep this in mind, 43% of those who are homeless work. So they're literally getting up every day, working a full-time job just to go lay in a box somewhere. But I want to read some responses to making the case for the minimum wage increase. You sound just like a poor me, help me get ahead, but I'm not willing to work hard for it kind of guy. I started washing dishes at $2 per hour, and now I run a 20 million business. Why? I worked my behind off and didn't whine about the horrible jobs along the way. So there's this rags to riches nonsense that people like to equivocate, where they say, I was able to do this. I, for example, do not have problems as far as the homelessness is concerned. I've never lived, without a place to stay, but that does not preclude me or exclude me from being able to empathize with people who have not had the same advantages that I've had. And so when you read a comment like this, it really presents this narrative that people who do not directly experience something want to believe and convince themselves, oh yeah, well they just didn't work hard enough. But if you have people who are working full time and getting paid crumbs for doing that, it's nonsense. But it goes back to, and added to the fact that these are the same people who are backing a man, Trump, who is only rich because of the success of his father and went bankrupt 4 times. But that's how screwed the narrative is. The other comment, which is slightly more significant, you can also give high wages. I agree with that, but with higher wages comes up higher grocery bills. Best food prices will go up, milk prices will go up, movie prices will go up, and after that, everything will seem the balance in the pay increase wouldn't make a difference. So it's this nonsense where anytime you advocate for increasing the wage, they tell you, oh man, the dire consequences of not paying someone pennies is going to mean that they'll raise everything. So for example, if you say, oh, they'll kick off people that are working somewhere, I'm sure if you increased it to $50 in every state, they probably would. But if, let's say, the wage was $15 and you increase it to 16, is now everywhere going to increase by $1? And even if they wanted to, wouldn't the president or governors of these states be able to regulate and mandate that businesses have to stay at a fixed price for a duration of years while they implement an increase in wages? But see, that goes back to the nooks and crannies of how ridiculous the arguments against it are. If you have a wage that is raised marginally, so going up by $1 or 2 or 3 or 4, and you are afraid that businesses will say, "Oh man, they want us to pay them $3 more an hour. Let's fire 30 people." Why not create some set of bills that make it a restriction to fire someone in the event of a marginal increase in wages, and then outline what that is? Nowhere does it say in the Constitution that this is not allowed to happen. This is illegal. You can't do that. It's just people trying to find ways to get out of moving from the status quo. And like I said earlier in this video, you have a majority of people unable to afford $1,000 emergency, which happened before Trump got in office. And these people who are his supporters that don't want to accept that he does not care about those at the bottom, try to make excuse for, oh, you didn't work hard enough. Ugh. But I've said before that one of the reasons those at the top are able to stay at the top is that they influence the politicians to do their bidding. For example, Amazon's owner is making $30,000 every 20 minutes, Jeff Bezos. But we have found out that most of his workers are subsidized by the taxpayers within their local community. Now, Amazon is so big to where half of the online purchases go through it. So there's no reason in trying to resist it. Instead, they should try to regulate the quote-unquote free market and thereby force Bezos to have to pay his workers something that's actually livable. But this doesn't run through their mind. They want to believe in this this libertarian nonsense about, oh, everything, just let people do what they need to do and businesses will go and it's so great. And just no one ever tries to ask themselves, if a system that is designed to assist or otherwise let people enrich themselves through hard work has a majority of the people working 9-to-5 jobs or full-time in poverty, how is that system a success? What about that system is worth keeping in place? And that's why when you go and you watch Trump's rhetoric during his campaign about the forgotten men and women, and then you look and you see all of these people living in poverty, you know it's a bunch of nonsense. And you know that if he wanted to end their plight, he or the governors of these states, who, like I said, are bought out by these corporations to make these people work these very poor earning jobs, would create some bill that mandates they have to keep a certain number of workers at a set time for a set number of years while they increase the minimum wage marginally. There's no reason for someone to work full time and then still live in poverty. And like I said, when you bring this up, it pokes a hole in the narrative that, oh, everybody's just lazy. No, if someone's working 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and sometimes even on the weekends, they're not lazy. They're struggling, and they're definitely having a difficult time, but they're not lazy. But like I said, this is all emblematic of the lack of humanity that so many people have. And when you see, Sanders, for example, and he advocates for free college or something else that is designed to reduce the suffering of the average person, people say, how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that? You just want to give people free stuff. But then when you see an argument to increase the wages, which would mean people are going to go out and work and then get paid for actually doing something, you know it's not something free. And you know that the people who are arguing against hard-working Americans going out and getting wages that are actually intended to assist them are just a bunch of narcissistic, unsympathetic maniacs that back a man who, like I said before, is not a rags to riches story, but they've allowed him to present himself that way, because they're not interested in actually seeing things for what they are. Whether you like Trump, whether you like Obama, whether you don't like either one of them, or at least their policies, such as myself, no one can reasonably look at what is currently going on in the United States and say this system has succeeded. It has failed miserably. You have a majority of people not able to afford $1,000, while you have a man who is literally getting paid $30,000 every 20 minutes. While you have a military, for example, that gets $717 billion, a $100 billion increase from the previous year, and no one bothers to bring this up. I mean, the U.S. spent $700 billion in Afghanistan by itself, and again, no one asked themselves, Where is all this money coming from? If you truly cannot afford to increase wages by a few dollars, then where is the money for these other exploits that aren't doing anything to help anyone that considers themselves to be part of the working class or lower than the top 1%? Actually, how are they benefiting from this? So it's a failed system. It has its defenders, and maybe in 10, 20 years they'll wake up. But by that point, we'll have further income inequality, and I would rather people be paid for doing a job full time and actually be able to live off that wage than not at all, which is what you can't get these people to concede. You hear stories like the one this guy says about how he didn't complain about the horrible jobs he was working, and he's convinced himself that if you follow that strategy of not complaining about the horrible jobs, somehow suddenly you'll be able to afford things that if you just change your mindset, your paycheck will actually increase. It's nonsense, and it's pointless rhetoric that is designed to ignore the plight of most people. So it's sad, but whatever.